You have heard that it was said. Yes, it has been said, but I'm not ready yet. All right? You are beautiful beyond description, too marvelous for words, too wonderful for comprehension, like nothing ever seen or heard. Who can grasp your infinite wisdom? Who can fathom the depths of your love? You are beautiful beyond description, majesty enthroned above. And I stand in awe of you. I stand in awe of you. Holy God, to whom all praise is due, I stand in awe of you. Be seated, please. So I actually left my real Bible in the truck, and my truck is parked about a half mile that way, so out over in the grass. So I got this Bible, but sometimes you need stuff in order to help you to remember. So this guy was a preacher, and he was preaching along on Revelation 3, verse 11. Behold, I come quickly, hold fast to that which you have, lest any man take it from you. So he said, behold, I come. And he forgot the rest of the passage, so he said, I'm going to back up from the pulpit here, and then I'm going to come forward, and then I'm going to remember it. Behold, I come, and he forgot it again. So he said, well, third time is the charm. Behold, I come. This time he's getting frustrated with himself, so he pushed the rostrum over the edge of the podium, and it landed in the sister's lap in the front row. And he was apologizing to her, ma'am, I'm so sorry. And she said, that's all right, preacher, you warned me 3 times. So... So here we go. You have heard, I know it's an old joke, but Paul Sherrill, that gorilla story is old too. All right, so you have heard Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, and Luke 6, verses 17 through 49. So the Mount of Beatitudes, some of you have been there more than I have. Brother Jerry said he'd been to Israel 11 times. I haven't been but twice. But you can look at the traditional spot here if you think that's right. May or may not have been, but anyway, it overlooks the northwest shore. And you can go worship here. Matter of fact, we had a devotional here. They're going to mess up about every spot that you're interested in by building a church building on top of it. All right, and it'd be just nice if they just wouldn't do that, but nonetheless they do. And so here's a church building that might be on the spot, might be where Jesus delivered it, except here's part of the problem. Matthew 5 through 7 contain the single largest block of Jesus teaching about how to live. And that's morality, by the way. Amore is a rule of how you live, and ethic means of the people. So ethics and morals are the same, and this would be the largest block of his teaching, and it's recorded here. Now, is it the same sermon? I don't know. Okay, but here we go as to why I think I don't know. Matthew locates the Sermon on the Mountain in 5 and 1. Luke places it on the level place in 6:17. So it's possible there were 2 different sermons, since Jesus certainly talked about many of the same things as that every time that he would speak to people, because the needs would be the same. It's also possible it was the same sermon and perhaps redacted or maybe abbreviated. The 2 sermons begin and end alike and follow the same general order. If it is the same sermon, neither writer records probably the whole thing. So Jesus introduces the concept here of going above the bar. That's the name for your weekend conference, and that is, raising the bar. So he raises the bar for all of us. Now, he wants you to know this, because he's about to say some things, and you wonder, how can you get by with saying that, Jesus? Well, he's going to set this up by saying, look, I'm not telling you about what I'm about to say in order to destroy the law. I want you to understand I'm not coming to destroy, I'm coming to fulfill. So when you fulfill the law, you respect the law, and you are the fulfillment of the law, but you don't intend to contradict the law. Matter of fact, Jesus did not intend to do so. In what he's about to say, he did not intend to do so. So the Christian life is a life of fulfillment, as Jesus fulfilled the prophecies, and he kept the Old Testament law perfectly. The new Christian standard is greater. It's higher. It's actually, above that which some of the Pharisees would have thought would have been the case. Our righteousness It's to be of a different character. It's not mechanical, but the way that we live. Therefore, our righteousness comes from a different motivation. So here's the pattern, and here are the 6 you have heard, or the prophets of old have said. In each case, Jesus puts the focus on the heart, i.e. discipleship from the inside out. Now, Wes, you are my friend, and you preached about Christianity from the inside out, and I'm glad you did, but I'm older than you, and I've been teaching this longer. Okay, so what I'm saying is, and Jesus is older than both of us. All right, so when we talk about this, it is not new that this is what Jesus is doing. It is not new that he's focusing on the heart. One of the things as a parent that you're going to that you understand, I'm sure. How many parents do we have here? Hands up. Okay, so you understand this. It's one thing to modify a child's behavior, as we were talking last night. It's another thing to change their mind, to change their heart. And you think, well, if I do this, if I make them go to church and do the right things, it's going to help. Yes, it will. But at some point, there still needs to be that transition. It's like love and fear. You know, there's a time when you were baptized and you probably were scared to death. Why? I don't want to go to hell. Now, at that moment, that might not have been the best motivation, but when you were baptized, it probably was a good motivation because you were scared. You were scared that if Jesus were to come, that you'd be lost. Later on, perfect love is going to cast out fear, but fear is a good motivator on the front end, but it doesn't last long. And if you keep on doing this, well, you see, of course, So when your kids are little, you try to put the fear of the Lord in them, and you try to make sure that they know who the boss is and all that stuff. I wish somebody would go to Walmart and tell those kids and those parents there this today. You know, because apparently at Walmart, people do not understand that the kid weighs less than you do, and you can take them out. I'm just talking about it in a general sense. All right, and you can do something to make the child mind, but you can't change their mind. That's something that they have to do for themselves. So that means then we look at the 6th antitheses. That means here's what has been said, and here's what I'm saying, and they're known as the 6 antitheses, and that might be the last time I say that word because it's hard to say. All right, so here they are, and yep, well, there's my sermon. See you later. No, okay, so then let's talk about this, the first one. Okay, Wes, I'm not going to say this as well as you did because I really enjoyed your lesson. You punk. I can't believe you stole my sermon. Okay, all right, but you were right, and I'm thankful for what you said. Here's the way I talk about it. The older generation, was emphasizing duty, honor, respect, and responsibility. Why are you going to church? This is my duty. Why are you going to church? Well, it is an honor, and I want to honor God. Why are you going to church? Well, because it is the right thing to do. Duty, honor, respect, responsibility. The greatest generation, the World War II generation of Tom Brokaw, the greatest one, as it was said. And that's why you go to church, out of these things. Now, then these new guys come along who don't even wear ties whenever they preach. Okay? And then these new guys come along and they want something else. They want a relationship with God. That's one reason why it's difficult for us to understand. Listen, if you've been brought up, teaching that you must sing a cappella and there can't be women in the pulpit and all that kind of stuff, then why would you leave that? You have been taught. And then they go to another religious body where they find relationships, and often they're going to prefer relationships over doctrine because it's going to trump in many cases if you feel like you fit in at a place like that. Now, what I would hope would be the case is that those of us who are older actually did emphasize relationships. But it didn't come across that way to so many. It was about rules and rules and rules and rules. Then when the new generation comes along, the millennials, let's say that they're the ones born since 1987, and the Generation Z, those born since about 1997, they come along and they do not like standard church. They do not like standard church of anybody's, not just the churches of Christ. They don't like standard church that there's any other religious group that's out there. They don't like it. Why? Because there's a difference in culture, and they go to church and they're not feeling it, and they don't believe that they have a relationship with God. So Jesus is going to attack that immediately here because he does know exactly the point that was being made earlier today, that there is no relationship with the Pharisees. It's all about, have you ever tried to count spices? You know, have you ever gone to your spice cabinet and say, today I want to count the little celery seeds. And today I want to divide up the little bitty pieces of cinnamon and nutmeg so that when I tithe, I can do 10% of that. That's going to be fun. Oh yeah, give me a root canal. I mean, why in the world would you want to do that? And yet that's what they had been taught. So the first one is, you have heard that it's been said, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. Reference, Exodus 20:13, of course, one of the 10 Commandments. Deuteronomy 5:17, and many other places. You can have a copy of this later, as long as the church can give it to you and you don't get my email address. Okay, so I would be glad for you to have a copy of this later if you wish it. Okay, and so that means then hatred and murder. Well, how do you fix it? Well, we're going to put more money into this. That's going to fix it. So in the U.S. government, we're going to tax more. And we're going to put more money into this, and the money's going to provide programs, and the programs are going to provide bureaucracy, and bureaucracy is going to fix it. Bureaucracy will never fix it. Why? It's an issue of the heart. And so you say, wait a minute, how do you fix murder? Well, does it sometimes involve a better place to live? Yeah, sometimes. And does it involve various other things? Yeah. My wife retired from teaching in the second grade. And we're so glad she did because she got to retire before she slapped one of the kids. Okay, and so she got to retire from the second grade. All right, now the good thing about that is that she loved her teaching in public school. Bad thing was, in her last class of 25 people, as near 25 kids, second grade, as near as she could figure, 2 of them went home to their mother and father. 2 out of 25. 23 out of 25 went home to an alternate home environment. And what are you going to expect? Well, her little kids would come in and say, you know, Miss Gilmore, a bullet passed over my head last night and went into my headboard just with a drive-by shooting. Another one had a brother who was shot and killed. And so they come to school. And what do you do to fix that? Well, what do you do to fix that is that, yes, programs might be nice, and of course it's going to require building playgrounds and an afternoon environment, alternate environments for them to play and all that kind of stuff, but ultimately it goes back to, why do you hate that person? Why do you hate that person? So Jesus is going to raise the bar, and in doing so, he's going to say, now in order to get to this point, you have to understand that anger or bitterness was brought condemnation by the court, and so just be careful how you call somebody airheaded, even if they did pull in front of you. So recently, we were in Pigeon Forge, all right, last weekend. I got 3 grandkids in the back seat. Oh man, life is good. I mean, they're back there, car seats and everything. And so this car pulls in front of me as we're going somewhere, and the 4-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old. Okay, the 4-year-old says, "You stupid car." And they said, and then the other 2 kids said, "Oh, you can't say stupid." And so I said, she didn't say it about the person, she said it about the car. And then the 8-year-old, honestly, said, "It's a matter of integrity." Okay. 8 years old. Okay, so why are you saying that? Well, why would, if mother's not here, you should do it the same way than if she is here. And I'm just in the front saying, boom. Okay, I say, wow, I don't know where the kid learned integrity. I wish all of my kids and I could learn integrity that well. So, airhead, stupid. Calling somebody a fool puts someone in danger of torment, and therefore the question is to reconcile. My father-in-law was a preacher of the gospel for many years, and one of the sermons that I remember from him is Matthew 5:23 and 24. Scary. I'm going to tell you that it's scary, and that is, but if you bring your gift to the altar and your brother has aught against you, King James would say, then you leave your gift at the altar and you go reconcile. Well, now, if that was done all the time, none of us would ever partake of the Lord's Supper. You know, 1 Corinthians chapter 11, by the way, it's not an adjective anyway, it's an adverb. It's not saying that we should be worthy in order to partake of the Lord's Supper, but it says that we should partake of the Lord's Supper worthily, which is an adverb. But nonetheless, it is true that when you focus on the Lord and there's somebody in that auditorium that you hate, it is difficult to focus on the Lord. Because your bitterness and the other things that are there just kind of push that out. And so he's saying reconcile. All right, so number 2, you have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. We're looking at Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5:18. Jesus calls his listeners to a higher standard. Lust is the problem. Why? Well, I don't know how your spouse looked when you left for work, the last day that you left from work, but let's say, for instance, that you left that person in sleeping attire, which is one thing that I've hated about my wife's retirement. You know, for the last 7 years, I've been getting up before her, and before that, she always got up before me, and I like that a lot better. Okay, but anyway, she's there, and she's not up yet, and so I say goodbye. Well then, all right, so now you're on the way to work, and then you pass somebody at a traffic light, and you look over there, and they're, you know, putting on their makeup or whatever. Let's hope it's a woman. Or they're putting on their makeup and everything, and you're thinking, whoa, she's a vision of loveliness. And then you find out that you work with her. And then you find out, let's see if we can manipulate a way to where we can be at the same place at the same time. And then all of a sudden this appreciation goes farther and farther and farther until boom, you have destroyed a family. And where did it start? Well, when you started looking at somebody else's pasture. You know, when you started seeing that. Now, let me say to those of you who neglect your own pasture, okay, don't do that. Why? Because 1 Corinthians 7, verses 1 through 7, tells you that when you married, you accepted the responsibility of trying to meet the needs of your wife, including sexual. And you accepted that, and if you didn't want to do that, then don't sign up for it. Same way with a woman. You signed up for that for your husband. You signed up for that. And if you signed up for that, then you might help your spouse not to be looking in somebody else's pasture, but I'm not saying it's your fault. I'm just saying we need to tend to our own home cooking sometimes. And whenever we do that, it makes it a little easier to keep that family together. And besides that, you marry a woman like my wife who would kill me if I, well, never mind. All right, so then there's the lust idea. Lust is the motivation for adultery, and it became the focus of his attention. In Jesus' mind, an unfulfilled desire to do the evil is the starting point for doing it. Why? Because I say to myself, I fantasize, and other things that men often do. Men, it's a major problem. It's pornography. It's a major problem, not just for teenage boys. It is a major problem for us. I don't know about women. I got 4 daughters and my wife who's also a girl, and I don't understand. Matter of fact, the last time I think I understood my wife was when we both said I do. Okay, but you know, there's a lot of things I don't understand, but I do understand this, that men are visually attracted. And when you find yourself visually attracted, Job said, I made a covenant with my eyes. With my eyes. Well, why my eyes? Well, I didn't take a covenant with my tongue. I didn't keep a covenant with my fingers. I did this with my eyes. Because if you can see, then, John, I love you. I met you last night. And you might not be able to see some of the rest of us, but you're here today, and you see a lot more than a lot of people do. So I'm glad to have you here, brother. Okay, but when you see with your eyes, that's part of the problem that Jesus is getting at. And then, all of a sudden, it becomes a problem in the church. And then, how long does it take the church to overcome a situation where an elder or a deacon or a preacher has run off with somebody else's spouse? How long does it take? And the answer is you probably will not outlive it. You probably will not outlive it because it's going to last a long time. Therefore, that's where it is. Now, if you want me to lecture a lot about divorce and remarriage, since I have it in my family, I'm not going to do that. But I'm going to tell you where the starting point is. And that is, guys, make sure that you watch what you see. Watch what you see. Just like if you want to fix murder, start with the anger and the hatred that leads toward it. If you want to fix not having any premarital affairs whatsoever, then stop what starts that, and that is the lust of the eyes, because the heart is the seat. And by the way, this does not require consenting adults. I don't know how all that other, just consider yourself fortunate that you got some extra letters in there. All right, so the point then is that's what we're doing. Okay, number 3. It was also said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. Well, here in Deuteronomy 24, if you begin to look it up, you'll find out a number of things about it. This word for uncleanness doesn't necessarily imply a sexual sin. This is not the most direct Hebrew word for sexual sin. So what we have here is uncleanness. If a man finds uncleanness with his wife, well, then the rabbis get a hold of that for a few hundred years. You know, Hillel and Shammai and others, and they say, well, I wonder what that could be. Well, that could be, burning your bread. I'm not making this up. Burning their bread was one of those things. And so why would you have a divorce with somebody? Well, the list could become long and long. And by the time Jesus preached, the list was very long. Now, Jesus did a number of things here. Number one, he said, I'm going to use a more specific word here. And the word is porneia. Not the same as the Hebrew word, but not a violation of it. It just zeroes in on what the point is, because sex sells everything. In a class recently, we happened to be talking about 1 Corinthians chapter 7. So I just asked the guys and girls in the class, I said, okay, what does sex sell? And then they began to mention this. Okay, there's nothing from pickup trucks, to water that you can mention that sex does not sell. So if that's true, then what do I need to do? Well, I need to understand that porneia is a broad word here that involves all kinds of sexual sins. And it is the word from which we get our word pornography. By the way, the word eros is not in the New Testament, and the word that we often use, erotic, is not in the New Testament, but it is implied in a number of places. Now, that could include bestiality. It could include homosexuality. It could include polyamory, which means trying to, quote-unquote, make love with a number of people that are not your spouse. It could include having affairs. It could include other things like that that are in the area. Now, I don't have time to discuss this in detail as to whether or not looking at fornication is a cause for divorce. There is a difference in verse 28 and verse 32. Verse 28 says, if you are doing this in your heart, cardia, the heart. If you are doing this in your heart, then you should stop it in the heart. But now moikeia is not just something that you do in the heart in verse 32, although it is a sin against your wife if you're looking at pornography. It is a sin against your spouse if you're doing that. There's no question that that is a sin. The issue is whether or not it is included under one of the reasons why I can divorce this rascal, because I've looked at his computer and I've found that there's some stuff there. So I'm going to say to you that there's a difference in verse 38 and verse 32 that makes me uncomfortable to say to you that it is one of the reasons that's there, because it doesn't really fit the teaching pattern. The teaching pattern is Jesus says, all right, you want to fix hatred? Killing, how do you do that? Well, you focus on hatred. You want to fix adultery? Well, how do you do that? Well, you focus on lust. And the lust, of course, obviously is in the heart. Is there a difference in killing somebody in your heart and actually killing somebody? Yeah. Is there a difference in doing other things in your heart and actually doing them? Yeah. A person says, well, if it's going to be in your mind, it might as well be in your mouth. No, because sometimes we have extraneous thoughts that nobody needs to hear, and we need to try to make sure that we try to push them out of our heart and life, because they will get to you and they will kill your spiritual life. So Jesus urges us to follow on to lead us to not allow things to lead us to sin. Better to literally remove a part of this body than to allow that part, along with the rest of us, to be thrown into hell. Of course, obviously, as has already been addressed, Jesus is using this, as Steve was saying last night, in order to get their attention, and indeed it was. I do know of a case in West Tennessee where a person was mentally challenged, that her eyeball had been found on the sheet whenever they saw her in the morning, because she took this literally. Okay, so don't take this literally, but you take it the way that Jesus intended it. The way he intended it is, your body is going to be one of the first things that goes after you die. So why would you want your body to keep you out of going to heaven? Why would you want to do that? And therefore, make sure that you prioritize the way that he's talking about here, because sexual impurity is just not worth it. It is just not worth it. It's kind of like trying to pull up weeds from your early corn. And you try to pull up the weed, and it's connected to this, and it's connected to this, and it's connected to this. And before you know it, one time my mother had planted some corn, and I was going to go get rid of the Johnson grass. I don't know if y'all like Johnson grass around here or not, but we don't in Middle Tennessee. And so I was going to, and I was saying to myself, man, I wonder why this Johnson grass is growing so systematically. Okay, and so I was just pulling up the corn. Okay, why? Because at an early stage, it looks like Johnson grass. And my mother was not pleased. She was 5'0", but she really was not pleased, and I remember that to this day. But here's the problem with pulling out the weeds. They get connected to the good stuff that you want to keep in there, and it's difficult to excise it. It's difficult to get it out because it starts getting connected. And you say, the thoughts that I have only affect me, until, of course, they affect your spouse, and then they affect your children, and then they sometimes can affect your grandchildren. You know, one of the best things that you can do for your grandchildren, it's this. Never let them use you as an example of why it's okay to get a divorce. My wife and I have been married 48 years. 46 of them have been happy. Those first 2 are a little rough. Okay, and so you had to get used to each other. All right, so we've been married for 48 years, and how do you do that? Every day you affirm your spouse. Every day you confess your spouse. Like a Christian would confess Jesus. This is my wife. This is my woman. You know, this is the main person in my life. When you stop doing that is when Satan has some leverage with you, and he can get his toe in the door of your life. So don't let that happen. So whatever may happen to my children, they will never say that they did whatever they did because their mother and dad divorced. And my mother and dad were married for 59 years and 10 months. And her mother and dad were married for 57 years and about 8 months. So between her parents and my parents, that's 117 years of marriage. So I ain't even near breaking a record. I mean, you know, I'm not even close to breaking a record. So what you do is you make sure that you try to fix this on the front end, because let me tell you, when you scramble eggs, it is difficult to figure out all this stuff, especially when you say, well, this person committed fornication. Well, yes, and you had not slept with your wife for 18 months. But this is the person who committed fornication first. Yes, but you were a jerk. You didn't pay attention to your spouse. You didn't do what you should have done. I don't know how to take care of all that except to say to you that what Jesus says here is true. I believe that it's true, and we should make sure that we have healthy marriages. Again, you have heard that it has said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. All right, I swear. What do you swear by? Well, I used to swear by the hair of my head, and that's getting kind of thin. All right, so what are you going to swear by? Well, a lot of Jews would think, I need to, you say to a guy, man, I don't know if y'all on the eastern count on deer around here or the western count, but a 12-point buck back home is 6 points on each side. So some guy says, I shot a 12-point buck. Well, that's nothing. I shot a buck with over 100. You know, or, hey, I caught a 6-pound bass. I caught a bass so big that the picture weighed 6 pounds. Okay, and you're saying, and you just can't one-up a person like that, because they're always going to be whatever you said plus 1. So whenever you think about whatever you said plus 1, then here's what I'm thinking. Are you telling the truth? Yes, I am. Why? I swear by the beard of my father. Are you telling the truth? I swear on the grave of my mother. Are you telling the truth? I swear by, I swear by, I swear by, I swear by. My dad built houses in Middle Tennessee, over 150 of them. He was a carpenter. And when he died in 2000, I looked through some of the contracts that he had for building a house. And most of them were 2-page contracts, handwritten, where the other guy signed, I'm going to build you a house for, 3-bedroom house, bath and a half or whatever, and it's going to cost, $60,000 or whatever. This is back in the day. Okay, and so my dad's signature would be there, and the other guy's signature would be there. It's the end of the matter. It was just real simple. And now why do you have to lock everything? Why do we have these security guards? Why do you have to wonder, did I lock my car or not? There used to be an expression in the country, come to our house. If we're not there, we'll be back shortly. Go on in and make yourself at home. What happened to those days? They're not like that anymore. One of the things that happened is just this. Our yes is no longer just yes, and our no is no longer just no. Somebody says yes and they mean no, they say no and I mean yes. And so you're trying to figure out, are you telling me the truth now or not? It's like trying to once you know that a person has lied to you bald-faced right in the front, it is said of a person that they'd rather climb up a tree and tell a lie than stand on the ground and tell the truth. All right, so if you know that there's somebody like that in your life, do you trust them? Do you trust them? Do you confide in them? Do you tell them things about you that you don't wish everybody to know in order to try to help you to grow spiritually? No. Why? Because they have proven themselves to be unworthy. Therefore, why should you have to say to me, hey, by the way, I swear, or by the way, honestly, I'm telling you the truth. Well, do you usually lie? I mean, why are you saying that? So if you just say it as a Christian, it ought to be that way. I don't have it on, but my wife bought me, Wes, in order for me to try to look younger, she bought me a watch. I have a phone in my pocket. Why do I need a watch? Okay, and so it was $8.88 at Walmart. You should have seen it. It's magnificent. Okay, and there it was. And so I got to reading the instructions on this. And it's warranted for a year, but if it fails in a year, if you'll send it back to them along with a $10 check, they can repair or replace it at their discretion. I'm thinking, well, duh. Okay, let's see, I paid $8.88 for it to start with, and I have to spend all this money in order to try to see that it might get fixed? And so here's the lesson. A warranty is no better than the person who gives it. A guarantee is no better than the person who makes it. I guarantee you. Now, as brothers and sisters, it hurts worse when it happens with brothers and sisters. When brothers and sisters tell you it's supposed to be this way, and then you find, I'm thinking of a guy who had open heart surgery, and some of our brothers in Christ got together a medical group. I'm sure there are a lot of good medical groups put together by brothers and sisters in Christ. This was not one of them. Because he found out when he had to have open heart surgery that he was going to pay zero on his open heart surgery, which back in the 80s, it was still more than $100,000. So how good can it be for brothers and sisters? Tell me what you believe to be true. I'll tell you what I believe to be true. If I tell you I'm going to come, I'm really going to try to come. If I tell you I'm going to try to be there, I'm really going to try to be there. If you promise me something, I expect that from you. If I promise you something, you expect it from me. There's a way in the Bible that Paul has to say this. God is faithful. God is faithful. God is faithful. Why? He's not going to lie. He's not going to lie. And one thing about getting older is I can't see the clock back there, so I guess I can just preach as long as I want to. All right, so next then, Christians should simply be honest and nothing else is necessary. Our very word, since we belong to God, ought to be representative of Jesus Christ because I promised. Now, can you take an oath in office? Let's say you're about to be sworn in as a witness. Yeah, you can do that, I think. That's not what Jesus is talking about here. He's talking about frivolous oaths of people who really had a close association with the truth anyway. So can you swear in office? It's not the same thing. Besides that, there's a word in Greek that Paul often uses whenever he's talking about the fact that this is something that I swear. This is something that I affirm. So the Apostle Paul did it in some of the epistles. Number 5, you have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Baseball season just started. So what we're going to do then is everybody's mad at the Astros. Sorry, the Astros probably are not mad at themselves, but people are mad at the Astros. And so one of the problems is going to be, here's an Astro batter up there, okay, and he's looking at this pitcher who can throw a fastball at 95 miles an hour, and one of them's likely going to be coming at his head. Okay, now why is that? Because, these boys who play baseball have gotten upset because they don't make enough money. Okay, they have gotten upset that somebody might have stolen somebody else's signs. By the way, I'm not in favor of cheating. I wouldn't know the names of 3 Astros players. But I'm saying to you that right now, every batter that gets in a box has to think about the fact that somebody is going to want to try to bean him. Or somebody's going to want to try to come in to second base with their cleats up. Somebody's going to try to hurt you. Why? Because we don't like what you did, and we're going to retaliate. Well, then what do you think some members of another team are going to do? Well, it's that one and a little more. You did this to me, and I'm going to do the same thing to you and a little more. That's how wars get started. Because it did this and a little more. This is called in Latin lex talionis. It means an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a hand for a hand, a foot for a foot. And it is in the old law, in Leviticus 24, verse 20, etc. It is definitely there, an eye for an eye. But do remember that there was no separation between the church of Israel and the government of Israel. They were one and the same. So, God is going to give them requirements of what they can do as far as the government is concerned with regard to punishment. But it's very difficult to separate what he wants for the church of Israel as opposed to what he wants from the state of Israel. And so here's what Jesus says to us. There's Sally Field. There you go. Okay, the eye for an eye law was a part of the law of Moses designed to actually prevent revenge. Therefore, it was responsible for the carrying out of proper and equitable punishment. But here's the problem. Roman domination of the Jews. And what are you going to do? Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. He's going to hit me on my right cheek, and I'm going to turn my other cheek. Then when he runs out of cheeks, I'm going to bust him in the mouth. And why is that? Because, that's what we do. You know why? Because I'm tired of doing this cheek stuff. And then another person says, well, I want you to go, although this is difficult to actually indicate in Roman law, but it was generally understood by the Jews that if a Roman soldier were to come by with his pack, which would be very heavy, he could ask you to walk 1 mile with it. And most people would know, even some of the Jews would know how far a mile was from their house on either direction on the road. So I know that I have to carry it this far. Or I know that I have to carry it this far, but I want you to know that after this, I'm laying that burden down. And Jesus says, okay, I want you to do the right thing and then some. Do the right thing and then some. Say that with me, 1, 2, 3, and then some. That means when you thought you've done the right thing, you do and then some. If a person is suing you for your outer coat, you give him your inner cloak as well, because and then some. Now, what's the principle? And then some. You give them more than they think, and then they start asking, what church are you a member of? Who do you follow? Tell me about this. A lot of your best Bible relationships are going to be stuff that you didn't even set up. I remember one time I'd been to California to speak, and I was tired. So I was looking forward to the Sunday afternoon nap, right? And then this woman who looked like she was a little weathered, okay, she sat down next to me, and she didn't look talkative at all. And so I'm about to get a nap, and then she looks at me and she says, hi, I'm a retired IRS auditor. There's several things wrong with that, IRS and auditor. Okay, and the fact that I wanted to sleep. And she said, what do you do? And I wanted to say, I shoe horses. Okay, because if you say you are a minister, you know it's coming. Okay, so I told her, and we start this cross-continental discussion about how she had given herself to her life and to her work, and she'd gotten a divorce, and she was alienated from her children, and she was flying to Georgia in order to try to get reunited with her children. And then this woman started to cry. Well, shoot. If somebody's going to be crying, I got to be a part of it, okay? And so she just started to cry. You know, there's people like that everywhere. And sometimes, if you do it right, it's like you wear a sign that says, talk to me. On the elevator, airplane, just talk to me. Why? Well, I might not have been through what you've been through, but I've been through some stuff that's similar. And so number 6, you have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. You know, this is really the only one that doesn't come from the Old Testament. It was generally understood. Maybe it was because all the wars that Israel had been involved in, it was generally understood that you didn't have to love your enemy. But then now we're in a time where it's very difficult because enemies seem to proliferate, and there's somebody out there that wants you to do harm. At our lectureship at Freed-Hardeman, we had some guys who thought they were going to be cool and say some nasty things about Freed-Hardeman by putting it on the side of a U-Haul trailer. These people are supposed to be brothers in Christ. They don't understand brotherhood, and they don't understand Christ. So what do? Well, I'd like to pray for them. After, of course, I shoot them. You know, I'd like to pray for them. I did the open forum at Freed Harbin 20 years by myself, and now 4 years with 2 other people. We had to close the microphones one year where people could just come up and ask Bible questions. We had to close those microphones after 21 years because of what we thought these people were capable of doing. So one of the things that I used to put on the front here is be gracious. I remember being called on to repent at least 3 times publicly while I've been doing the open forum. Because the funny thing about doing that is the people who come up to talk to you afterward think that you are both the smartest person they've ever seen and the dumbest person they've ever seen. And they all want to talk to you at about the same time. And so I got this advice from a person. Be gracious. Even if they are the enemy of Freed Hardman, they are the enemy of the gospel as best you can understand it. Because if you're ugly toward them, that's exactly what they would like for you to do. And so, love your enemies.